On today's episode of Locked On NHL, hey, JD, is this the worst roster of the Sidney Crosby era?
It's the worst roster of the Sidney Crosby era Penguins so far.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On NHL, your daily podcast covering the National Hockey League. We are your first listen each and every day, and we are your team each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On today's episode of Locked On NHL, we take a look as we continue our Burning Questions series. We take a look at the Buffalo Sabres, the Anaheim Ducks, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, joined by JD Young of Locked On Sharks. And before we talk about the Penguins, JD, let's talk about a team that is trying to break a 13-year playoff drought. That, of course, is being the Buffalo Sabres. And I guess this season, the Sabres are going with the mantra of, well, it can't be as bad as last year was, right? They're mostly running back pretty much the same roster they had last year.
Yeah, this team that didn't really do too much in free agency. Zachary Jones, Justin Danforth, that kind of they just signed Connor Timmins. So, really working around the fray there. They traded JJ Peterka this offseason because Peterka was clearly unhappy with the direction of the organization. They drug out the Bowen Byram thing. Author thoughts he might get traded, he might not get traded. And then they end up just signing him to a bridge deal here. And it does very much feel like, well, let's just try it again here as to try to break this playoff drought for a team that finished with 79 points in 82 games last year. And yeah, it's very much, I guess, what's the plan? I think that's the big question, right? What is the plan with the Sabres team? Because it clearly is just like the fans are fed up, right? We heard all about last offseason or last during the season. I don't know what the plan is with this team. What are they trying to do?
Well, and I think the biggest area for concern with this Sabres team is what happened reportedly during the back half of the season last year into the offseason into this year was the reports of there being some level of unease by several Sabres players as to the direction this team is going in. Ultimately, players want to make the playoffs. They want to have a chance to compete for the Stanley Cup. But as this Sabres team is currently constructed, they feel like one of those teams, like there are two classifications of teams. Are the teams that as long as everything for them goes according to plan, that they'll make the playoffs. This Sabres team feels like one where they need everything to go right for them, and they need to have
everything to go wrong for everybody else.
Yeah, they need to have things happen to the teams in front of them in order to get into the playoffs. Like it's a pretty stacked field out there in the eastern half of the playoff picture. And like you look at it right now, here are the teams that finished above the Sabres but missed the playoffs. Pittsburgh, New York Islanders, New York Rangers, Detroit, and Columbus. Now, Pittsburgh, as we're going to talk about here in a little bit, probably one of the few teams there that did not improve from last year to this year. And I still think most, if not all, those teams in the Eastern Conference that made the playoffs are going to be in the similar spot again this year.
Yeah. And yeah, like this team, maybe the hope is like Josh Norris, who you acquired at the trade deadline last season, stepping in as your new 1C. Maybe he can kind of stay healthy, because when he's been healthy, he's been excellent. But the problem with Josh Norris is the dude's never healthy, right? And then you added Kesselring, who I know a lot of GMs and such really like Kesselring and kind of like what he brings on the blue line there. And you got Josh Stone, who, maybe he makes the roster, maybe he spends some time in the AHL and maybe plays later on this year. But again, like this roster just kind of feels kind of locked into what they are, and you're hoping like it's hard for me to point to players other than maybe Tage Thompson having just that banana season again. It's hard for me to kind of point to a lot of players and be like, okay, if this guy improves by 5% or something this year, this guy gets a little bit better, then you can kind of see it. Other than like Tage Thompson, going back to how we saw from a couple seasons ago, maybe Jack Quinn, gets a bigger role here. But still, there's not a lot of room for growth, I feel like, on this team for them to kind of make that step and make that bigger. Yeah. And,
on the goaltending side as well, I mean, Ukko Pekka-Luukkonen is a young goalie who he's had solid seasons, but is he really like a bona fide number one? And, you've got Alex Lyon in the goalie room as well, Devin Levy. Do you have the goaltending that's going to be able to carry you down the stretch and prop up the offense when they're not holding up their end of the bargain?
Yeah. And I mean, how much can you rely on that, right? It kind of reminds me of like in baseball, when you have really good pitching but terrible hitting, like my San Francisco Giants, where like it can get you so far, but it just wears you down. Like that you're having to ask your goalies to kind of do everything every night. Like it just really wears you down. So, I mean, the Sabres did, like, they finished in the top chunk, or I guess in the top 10 last year when it came to goals for. They had 269 goals, which was, about 10th in the league right now. Are we going to get the same sort of offense? And then you just got to hope maybe the goaltending can and the defense can. But again, like, you have a lot of the same main guys back, right? Powers and Dahlin and Bowen Byram, and you added Kesselring. Like, I don't know. Maybe they just hope that this year is better than last year. But again, I mean, you literally had like the owner fly out to talk to them like on a road trip at some point because of how bad things were last year. So I don't know. What do you think is the most likely path for the Sabres this year, where they just finish again in the bottom 10 of the NHL and they're another top 10 pick, and they just kind of a creamy middle team?
Yeah, I think that's their most likely scenario. And even if they do break through, I mean, remember this team a couple of years ago where they scored just a ton of goals. Tage Thompson had 40 plus, and it really felt like Don Granato really got the most out of that team. Yeah, they didn't make the playoffs. They came close, but they were like fighting for a wild card spot until the final handful of days of the season. So that feels like really the top end as far as things for them go, unless you're going to slip past one of those teams that was in like the third spot of the division. That's about the only way I could see them, hopping more consistently into the playoff picture. But I think a good season for them would be fighting for a wild card spot and ultimately maybe coming up a little bit short, or maybe being the last team to grab one type of thing.
Yeah. What do you think more likely to happen before we get into the next talk about the Ducks? This team blows it up, or they just run it back again next year?
That's a good question. And I think a lot of that has to do with how long Lindy Ruff is going to hang around. It feels like they kind of brought him in to try to squeeze the last little bit out of this group. And if he's not able to do it, it feels like they just say, we got to go back to the drawing board.
And I mean, Kevin Adams too has been there since 2020. This is the roster you've built. So this might be, I think it's more likely that they're clean sweep this upcoming offseason and start from scratch. So
yeah, this could get dicey for the Sabres if things don't go well. So score at will and
hope you get some
pray, I
goaltending.
guess. Yeah.
Yep.
Our next team that we're going to discuss is a team with a coach who has no shortage of playoff success, but will that translate onto the NHL roster? We will discuss as we continue today's episode of Locked On NHL after this. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, property, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart characterization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. We are your team each and every day as well. Talking now about the Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks have a new coach behind the bench in Joel Quenneville of Chicago Blackhawks lore. Notoriety probably is the better word to use there. Won a couple of cups. Then now has he went to the Panthers, was barred from the league, and now is back with Anaheim, a team who is trying to take their young talent and translate it to potential playoff wins. They had 80 points this past year, which is they were getting closer. They're getting closer. Yep. It seems like they got the goaltending figured out. Yep. They have added more veteran muscle and oomph to the lineup over the last couple of months. Trevor Zegras no longer on the roster. Ultimately, is it going to be enough for the Ducks to finally make their way back to the playoffs?
That's the big question, right? And this team's still not done yet because you still have Mason McTavish, noted RFA, unsigned, and there's a lot of trade talks of him potentially being available. What type of contract would he get? We know the Ducks, they tend to like to kind of bridge deals with some of these players here. So we'll kind of see what happens with him. But, as the veterans, right, that you signed Mikael Granlund to a 3-year deal at $7 million a pop. You traded for Chris Kreider from the Rangers. It just seems like just grab every Ranger guy. It's been the strategy lately. Jacob Trouba, who they traded for during the season last year. Yeah, I'm curious to see how this team performs. Because I was talking to Kyle, our Locked On Ducks host, and it's like the vibes do worry me. And yes, I know it's a small market in Anaheim, etc. But like, if this team gets off to a slow start under Quenneville, like it does worry me that like you hired this guy who's supposed to kind of fix things, and you went out and you got some more veterans. And you're just not able to kind of do anything here. But there is a lot of, like, if you look, there is a lot of room for potential growth, right? Leo Carlsson coming into his zone. You look at the blue line, right? You have Jackson Lacombe, who had a breakout season last year. You have Olin Zellweger, Pavel Minchikov. Like, there's a lot of young defensemen who you kind of expecting to take the next step. You found your heir apparent in Lucas Dostal, and you finally ended the John Gibson saga this offseason by trading him to Detroit. So you can see like the baton is clearly being passed to these young players. And, you know, they have some key veterans around. Like, I think Mikael Granlund's a perfect veteran to have around who's going to do exactly whatever you need him to do. But I don't know. I do think the one thing that really does help the Ducks if they in this playoff push is just how bad the Pacific is, right? You look at, like, you know, Edmonton's going to be good. You know, Vegas is going to be good. The Kings are probably still going to be good. But after that, like, it's the Flames. It's who knows with the Canucks, right? We both just made fun of the Kraken for 10 minutes last week and the Sharks. Like, this is a very bad division. So the hope is they just beat up on the Pacific and just stack a bunch of points and can kind of maybe make a push for the wild card there. But I don't know, like it felt like this team was going to have a big off season and they didn't. And they still have $1 bajillion to spend in cap space. I know you're going to have to re-sign, like Jackson Combs going to need a big raise coming up soon. Mason McTavish needs they do have guys who need big contracts, but I don't know. I just thought they'd be a little bit more aggressive this offseason trying to acquire a star player.
The way that I look at this is similar to how we just kind of laid things out for the Sabres. Is I don't think the approach this year should be we're going to go toe-to-toe with the Golden Knights, the Kings, and the Oilers.
Yeah.
I think the teams
that's not reasonable.
I think the teams that you need to be worried about this year are Vancouver, Calgary, and Utah. I think that's how you play this is we are going to
Blues. I say the Blues in that mix too.
Yeah.
So those like wild card teams. Yeah.
We're going to try to be in the mix for wild card 2. That's our goal for this year is to try to be in the mix. Maybe you get fortunate in somebody that is within those top 6 or especially the top 3 in the Pacific. Maybe you get fortunate and somebody has a bad season and falls out of it. But it's most like, well, you never know. It feels like that's the most likely because we saw when Dostal was going really, really well. They were able to hold their own. They were a team that the amount of goals that they gave up substantially down from where it had been in previous seasons. They could not consistently get the scoring to match. So if they can get some of these vets to kind of lead the way, you get a few more goals scored, all of a sudden you're closer to an even split in goals for and against. And next thing you know, you're knocking on the door of wild card 2. But it's a similar story with the Sabres as well. It feels like in order for the Ducks to make the playoffs, you're going to have a major injury for Vancouver, Calgary, Utah, and probably St. Louis. You're going to have a major injury happen for each of those teams in order to vault them. Or you just have a ton of players that are going nuts this year.
I think the big thing, like you mentioned, the offense, this was the 3rd worst team when it came to goals for last year. They had 221 goals for. Only Nashville and San Jose were worse last year. So you're hoping, like, right, Chris Kreider, I know he had a horrible season last year, but a professional goal scorer. Like, the dude in his life has scored a lot of goals. You're hoping Mikael Granlund, that's 20 goals right there, right? And you're hoping that you're getting growth from your guys like Leo Carlsson and Mason McTavish, and some of these younger players who can come in and start to kind of take those next steps. Plus, getting more goals, I think, from the blue line. And they have plenty of players. Like I said, Lacombe, I think, is going to have another big season. I like Pavel Mintyukov a lot. Owen Zellweger, like both those young players, like, and Tristan Leno, like there's plenty of potential offense on the blue line there from Anaheim. So if they can get their offense around kind of middle of the league, that's a big jump, I know, but if you can get your offense around middle of the league and Joe Saul continues to play the way he, like, I do think this team is going to be in the mix, and I don't think it's going to be a horrible, like, sell everything off at the trade deadline type of season for them. But, and maybe Quenneville, we'll see how Quenneville does when he does have 6 Hall of Famers on his roster when it comes to the coaching. But like if he can be like a top 10 coach, you can at least see the path for them. So I'll ask, is this year, do the Ducks make the playoffs, or are they going to be going back? Are they going to, just going to be sad?
I think they will miss out this year because it's just, that's a tall order for a Utah team that I think a lot of people expect is going to be better this year than they have been the previous years. And also a Utah team that it feels like is in pretty urgent need, as we'll talk about when we get to them, pretty urgent need of a playoff run themselves. Yeah. And a St. Louis Blues team that found their winning formula with Jim Montgomery, a Minnesota Wild team that is
terrible teams at the end of the season.
A Minnesota Wild team that is hoping that for the third straight year, they don't suffer catastrophic injuries. I kind of feel like the betting money is on it not happening for a third time in a row, but, remains to be seen. They're just, it feels like the teams in front of them have too much like solidified, you don't have as many question marks with the teams in front of them. And so unless something gets majorly figured out, I feel like they're going to be one of those that finishes just outside. But I do feel like we'll look at this Ducks season and say they're close.
It was a success. Yeah, it was a success. A successful season would be like a Flames or Blue Jackets type of season from last year, where you're in it till the end for them. So if only they could bring back Cam Fowler, would solve a lot of their issues. So
there is a trade deadline approaching.
Bring it back. $2.5 million. Yeah. So
there is a trade deadline approaching and an opportunity to shore up their defense, which is something that our next team will not have the luxury of doing because their defense is heavily overpriced and is not great in general. We teased it at the top of the show. Is this the worst assembled roster in the Sidney Crosby era? We'll dive plenty into that as we finish today's episode of Locked On NHL after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. We are your team each and every day as well. And we finished today's show taking a look at the Pittsburgh Penguins, the only team so far this season that has no playoff aspirations. They are the one team that has said, yeah, we're not going to be great this
Not
year.
for us, guys. Not for us.
Hey, I applaud the effort because they have, I don't envy Kyle Dubas in what he is attempting to do, which is to put together the post Sidney Crosby roster, because the Twilight Sidney Crosby roster stinks.
It does. I feel very much, what's the DiCaprio where he like sits up on the couch and like does the snapping, pointing at the TV. I feel like that because I have seen this laid out before, right? A team that is actively tanking, and there's good reason to tank. Gavin McKenna, pretty good at hockey. The top of the 2026 draft is pretty good. Even if you don't get McKenna, the top of the 2026 draft is very good. But Look, like just some of the moves that this Penguins team has done this offseason, right? They traded Alexander Nedeljkovic to the San Jose Sharks, who was arguably their best goalie. When you look like dig under the hood, his goal saved above expected, like all that stuff. Easily their best goalie. They traded for Matt Dumba in the year of our Lord Gary Bettman, 2025. They got Artis Siljevs, the goalie from the Canucks, who had a really good AHL season last year and won the MVP in the AHL playoffs, and has played well in his NHL time, but still unproven guy. You have Tristan Jarry. Like this team is actively trying, and there's talks of Brian Rust and Ricard Raquel both being available, and they've already said they don't want to re-sign Malkin. Like this team is tanking. This team is actively tanking. Also, they're trying to trade Erik Carlsson as well. This team is actively tanking. I applaud it. More teams should just tank because tanking is cool. And you usually get it usually works out for you for the most part, unless you're the Detroit Red Wings. But this team I think is in play to be the worst team in the NHL. And I think Uncle Gary's going to make sure that the new ownerships gets themselves a really nice shiny toy in Gavin McKenna that they can build a new dynasty with. So this team is bad, man. This team is bad, and they're going to actively get worse. And even their signings they made this are all short-term 1-year deals that they're going to be able to trade at the deadline to try to get more assets. I've watched this for the past 2 seasons in San Jose.
Outside of Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, do the Penguins have 3 players that you could say, yeah, they can play a top 6 role without actively torpedoing what you're attempting to do? Do they even have it is just it takes collection of players like Island of Misfit Toys. It takes Island of Misfit Toys to an entirely different level. Like you have a bunch of guys that are just career bottom 6 and bottom 6 for a reason. Yep. And you're just essentially going to play musical chairs until you find some combination that I guess is not actively terrible.
Yeah, this team is, I mean, yes, they have, and they got plenty of guys who are going to start to kind of make an impact here soon, right? You have Wrecker McGroarty, you've got, Owen Pickering. Like you do have plenty of young players who are going to start to kind of, make their way into the system. But right now, I mean, I think this is the worst roster in the NHL. And if Sidney Crosby wasn't on there, this could be like you're talking 23-24 Sharks type of roster right here if it wasn't for Sidney Crosby. I do think Crosby, I know there's going to be talk of trade of Crosby. I don't think Crosby's going anywhere. I think he will start to usher in the new, and there'll be a nice handoff of him, for a couple of years. But I think we're going to see a lot of different. Do not go buying a Penguins jersey right now. That is my one advice. Yeah, if you don't have a Crosby jersey by now, other like that, it's not a lot of guys where you're jumping up for I got to get that guy's jersey. So.
The Penguins had 76 points this past season. Do you think they ultimately end up closer to 80 or 50?
50. I'll take the under on 50. If you set the over under at 50, the San Jose Sharks got 50 points last year.
52.
Which roster would look at the rosters? Which roster would you rather have?
Sharks without question.
I mean, yeah, they had Georgiev at the end of the season, fully taking it. But even right now, I think this is So, I'm just curious to see, does Kyle Dubas survive? It's easy to tear things down, but the building part's the hard part, right? And does he survive to see a full, see post Crosby era and like the new kind of glory days. I mean, I know that this has to have been the plan, right, since he got here, but you do wonder.
Yeah, because here's the other part of this too: is how much of the teardown, how much of it gets run by Crosby? Like, is he really? I know Malkin is in I think the final year of his deal. Is he going
Crosby
to
has
want
this year 2 years? Yeah.
Is he going to want to see Malkin dealt, or is he going to want to ride out the final year of Malkin in Pittsburgh? Because that limits your ability to get anything in return. And so I kind of wonder if maybe there's a little bit of, well, I'll stay, but I kind of want to have stuff run by me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just assuming.
I think he knows. I think he knows the plan. I think it's pretty clear. Like, he knows what this team is and where they're going. And I mean, he is a guy who does seem like he's wants to be a one-team guy. So maybe like they can, maybe the hope is like, hey, we tank this year, we tank hard, we get Gavin McKenna. Next season, you get to play with McKenna. We kind of see how this thing goes here, right? Because McKenna's not a center, like McKenna's a wing. So, like, hey, like, and let him learn from you and help kind of put the franchise in the kind of heading in the right direction before you leave. So, yeah, we'll see.
And maybe a little Rutger McGroarty as well.
Yeah, and like some of these other guys, like Rutger McGroarty and like some of the other pieces that they got coming here, but. Yeah, man, it's
Crosby plays with them for a season and is like, I can't do. These guys are not it. And then he says, I'm out
to Colorado. Yeah, send me to Colorado to play with McKinnon. So, yeah.
Well, one thing is for sure is that these three teams probably not Stanley Cup aspirations this upcoming season, but hey, playoffs for two of them would be a welcome sight. And if the Penguins make the playoffs this upcoming season with their
I assume every
roster,
other team has been like just eliminated from So
if the Penguins make it, God help us all. But
you'd still watch.
I definitely would. I would. It'd be like hanging off the deck of the Titanic, and you're like, hey, maybe I should look and see all the stuff that's going on in the engine room as it collapses into the water. I'm going to still watch. Yeah. But that's what we got for you here for today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. We encourage you to tune in to the rest of the week for our full rotation of Locked On NHL hosts, covering all things NHL throughout the week as we get you set for the start of the season, which is like 6 weeks away. It's getting so close. So make sure to follow us on all of your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day.